Now, court action by civil society group DStv Afrika has been postponed to next year. Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs Minister Dr. Nkosasana Dlamini-Zuma failed to submit her response, apparently, to the High Court. Now, the group is asking the court to declare the national state of disaster unlawful and to have it set aside. The organisation argues that it gives the minister the power to violate the rights of South Africans to earn a living, to move around and to assemble. Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize has meanwhile indicated that he will oppose the motion. There is likely to be an extension to the national state of disaster well into the festive season as well. Let's get you more on the story now. We're joined by Rob Hutchinson, who is Managing Director of Dear South Africans. Rob, am I getting the name of your organisation right? Dear South Africans?
Absolutely. Dear South Africa.
All right. So I suppose the question is, what's the base? We know that the basis of Dear South Africans, the group wanting the state of national disaster declared unlawful, is the threat to people's rights to earn a living, to move around, etc. It's that argument of lives over livelihoods. But as we now go into the festive season, there is now well and truly a threat of a second wave of infections. Do you agree that we need to have some sort of restrictions in place if we're going to avert an even worse scenario in the second wave than we even saw in the first wave?
Well, absolutely we do. And I think the public has become well accustomed to taking those precautionary measures upon themselves. We've seen a high compliance with mask wearing, a high compliance with sanitization and social distancing measures. We seem to be pretty capable of actually looking after ourselves and taking care for ourselves. To still be under a national state of disaster under the Disaster Management Act seems irrational at this stage, as the original circumstances seem to have changed and shifted. The environment has changed as well. Therefore, the extensions are actually based on the original decision to go into the state of disaster under the Disaster Management Act. And where in the beginning we were uncertain of our capacity to handle the influx of cases. We were uncertain about the capacity of our healthcare systems. Now at this stage, 8 months, 9 months in, we have a lot more data at hand. Do we need to still be under a seriously restrictive and almost authoritarian act, the Disaster Management Act? We don't believe so.
I think what you're saying at the start of that response, that people are well and truly adept at taking those non-pharmaceutical interventions. I think maybe some people will argue with that. If I just look at the increases in infections, let's take the Cape Town Metro as an example. 73% increase in infections over the past week alone, and the Metro itself is citing a lack of those non-pharmaceutical interventions like the wearing of masks in particular as the problem, as the reason why we're seeing an uptick in infections.
Well, that's generally based on assumption. We don't have actual evidence to that effect, because we've seen the same circumstances in areas where there's a high compliance of mask wearing and sanitization. So we've got to understand that the original idea for the lockdown was to give us time to prepare our healthcare facilities. It wasn't to stop the virus or stop the spread. It was to slow it down. So naturally, we are going to see little bumps along the way. And to quote our president, we're going to be living with this virus for many years to come.
Yeah.
So should we be under a state of disaster for many years to come? No. Our society is adapting to live with the virus as such.
Yeah, in fact, we had a discussion just a little earlier this morning about the importance of a vaccine, and the WHO telling us even the vaccine is not going to be seen as a cure-all for the virus. It's going to be one of the interventions among a number of interventions as we live with COVID-19.
Absolutely correct. You must understand this virus isn't a new virus. It's been around for many years in different forms. The coronavirus as such is the common flu virus, and it has actually mutated, and it will continue to mutate. So as we would take precautions for a severe flu epidemic, this is what we should be doing in this case as well. Do we need government to enforce that? No, we don't. We're pretty adept at it, and we are well aware. Even if we're not taking the precautions in some cases, we are well aware of the dangers imposed if we do not.
I think there's a lot of disagreement around whether we can say that the coronavirus is sort of similar to the flu virus, Rob, just given, the difficulty in treating the symptoms that come with COVID-19. But how successful do you think this is going to be in the courts, given that Dr. Nkosasana Dlamini-Zuma is obviously going to oppose this, the health minister himself now also citing his intention to do the same?
Well, look, our case is based on the extension of the state of disaster, particularly the one in October, November. And what we were looking for is the actual evidence behind it and the reasons for the extension. And from the data that we have, the limited data that we have at hand, it is based on the original decision, which is based on massive uncertainties and wildly inaccurate graphs and predictions. So all we want to do is have a look if this is valid, if they should be extending it, and under the current state of disaster. And if the reasons cannot be justified, then we have the current state of disaster set aside, and we look at alternative methods and maybe introduce it under different circumstances given the current environment.
Yeah. And that's, of course, particularly as we try to kickstart our economy into the new year as well. Rob, thanks very much for your time this morning.